It appears we are live, folks. We'll give people just a moment to get on and see who jumps on. Looks like we have a few people jumping on right now. Good morning. Welcome to the live stream. If you can see and hear me okay. I had an echo a second ago, so I had to restart the live stream. So good morning. IDPA is on. Hello, Chris. How are you? Good morning, folks. If you're jumping on, if you can hear me and see me okay, give me an audio and a video check. As you can see, I'm in a completely different space. I'm in my new office in a different place that I moved to just recently, and just kind of got it set up. It's not a great background. I know I got some power panels over here to my right. I'm not certain what to put over the top of those to make them look less, I don't know, ugly, for lack of a better term. But we are here right now, and we should have sound. Good morning, Gerald. Do you have sound for me? 1, 2, 3. Someone please tell me I have sound. Oh, audio is much better. Chris says audio is much better. Gerald, if you can't hear me, I think your sound might be down. So someone give me a video check as well. Gil is on. Good morning, Pablo. Good morning, Pablo. How are you this morning? 35 folks on right now. We're doing this live streaming, and Gilly says sound is good. So Gerald, if you can't hear me, it's on your end, man. Brian, good morning. All right, folks, we are going to jump right into it. And uniquely enough, if you could see what I have around me, I mean, I've got guns on a box over here. I got a gun down there. I've got guns right here. I've got a gun right there. I've got a bunch of guns all over the place. And we're talking about we're not talking about some. We are talking about a logical process to follow for selecting a defensive handgun. You know, whether you're selecting a defensive handgun for home defense use or you're selecting a defensive handgun for carry purposes, if you decide to carry it, how do you select that defensive handgun? I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things. For example, why I might select a defensive handgun for my carry position, which is specific. I carry in the appendix position. Why I might select a defensive handgun for home defense that is slightly different than what I might carry, how I might stay in a family of guns. Do you need night sights on a carry gun? Do we need all these things? What about optics? For some of us that are starting to have our vision maybe wane a little bit, do we need an optic on a handgun, or are iron sights okay? We're going to talk about all that stuff. If you're just joining me right now, it looks like we got a bunch of people on, about 60 people on, 61 people on. I know a bunch of coin members are on. I see TC Fuller. Number 1620. So if you're a coin member, go ahead and enter your coin number in the comments. I want to see who the lowest coin number is. If you're not sure what a coin member is, you can check out the link, MikeSeeklander.com, and that will lead you to American Warrior Society. Of course, those were my coin members. I know I also probably have ACSS members on, and the ACSS is the competitive side of the membership area that has all of the programs like the USPSA and IDPA Mastery, PCC Mastery, and stage breakdown section, slow-mo section, performance enhancement section. There's a lot of great material in there. If you're part of the crew that's been on with me for a long time, please click the share button, add it to my groups, add it to different groups that might want to join us. Let's see if we can bust 100 a day, maybe even 150 in terms of this live stream, because although it's a very fundamental discussion, I think it's a critically important discussion. And as a matter of fact, it's a discussion that I get asked about all of the time. For example, I just had a guy recently contact me who's a local guy, and he wants to buy a family member a handgun, and he wants to figure out, hey, how do I select the right handgun for this family member? So this live stream will guide people through this. Of course, as always, I will chop it up into little bits later on and post it on Instagram, and we'll probably repost it on the IDPA YouTube page as well. So lots of folks on. Let's see who we got on. Good morning. Hello, Sheila. How are you? Scott in Colorado. Hello, Scott. How are you? Joe Anderson is on. John Shriver in, of course, Oklahoma. Akeem, good morning. Good to see you. Mr. Walt Davis, I hope you're doing well, sir. Era Louie from Dover, Delaware. Good morning. Hey, Will Parker from Montana. Linda with Girls and a Gun, Fort Worth, Texas. Good morning, Girls and a Gun. all you girls and guns in Fort Worth, Texas, or wherever else. Brian Chrisman, good morning, good morning. So Dell Woodburn from Florida, good morning, Dell, how are you? Pat Cahill, northern Wisconsin, hope it's cool up there, man. Outstanding. So, all right, so let's talk about a few things. Number one, like always with all live streams, and you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. My voice is just a little bit off. Last week, just a personal note, we moved into this place, and we were scheduled to do the move on Tuesday of last week. On Monday at 2:30 a.m., I guess technically that would have been Tuesday, at 2:30 a.m., I woke up with chills and had a horrific virus fever. So on moving day, I had a fever of probably 102 to 103. Sat in my truck, shaking, hurting. My voice is still a little bit funky, something I'm still getting over. And my arms are all healing up. I'm not sure if you could tell that or not, but I've been clearing the property here. And I had a really serious case of what I thought might be poison sumac, but it's probably poison ivy. So I had to go to urgent care over that. So last week was a long, tough week. So my voice reflects that just a little bit. The good news is I'm getting better. I got my office set up. I've got my outdoor kind of CrossFit-ish gym set up. So as soon as I'm done with the live stream, I'm going to go hit my gym and sweat it out just a little bit more. So without any more delay, of course, safety is my primary thing. If you're watching this right now, maybe someone shared it and you're jumping on. My name is Mike Seeklander. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to MikeSeeklander.com. If you want to check out my defensive handgun training program, you can also find that at MikeSeeklander.com. All of the material that I'm covering today is in that defensive handgun training program. If you look for it on the bookstore, it's your defensive handgun training program. You can actually get it on iBooks now. So you can, if you're on an iPad of whatever variant or a Mac or some sort of device like that, you can actually find my books, all of my books, on iBooks, where before in the past, where I actually read most of my reading material through iBooks on my iPad, I couldn't find my own books, which is kind of crazy. So they're all on there now. Safety is the number one consideration. So if you're going to be doing this with me, if you're handling firearms and picking up guns or whatever else, please verify right now that you have no live firearms, or if you're carrying a firearm, please leave that carry gun in the holster or the safe or whatever else. No handling of live firearms. Now, if you're going to do a little bit of dry fire and you're dry firing maybe while you're watching this live stream, please make sure you have a safe backstop. In this case, in my new office, my backstop is to an extent brick in the back wall, and I have a very tough wall, and it actually goes out into a wooded area. So if something happened and I made the biggest mistake in the world and fired a live round, that's where it would go. So please, safe backstop and beyond. I see, hey, Edward Davies on. Good morning on the Mendocino coast, which I'm going to be at pretty darn soon. Edward, I know I need to talk to you probably about the class coming up, so don't let me forget to do that this week. Hey, Greg Gomes from Texas. Good morning. Hey, David W. Coffee and guns first thing in the morning is always good. Hey, Joe Marsh. I haven't seen Joe for a long time. Richard Schlarb, is that right, from Kansas? Nice to see you this morning. All right, folks. Share, let people know we're on, and let's get into it right away. So let's talk about defensive handgun selection. So what are the things that I would like you to follow in terms of selecting a defensive handgun? And this is actually a Wilson Combat Beretta variety compact gun. So this is not the full-size Beretta 92G that I might compete with in the production division. This is a smaller gun that I actually got to carry for a period of time. Of course, this is a double-action first-shot handgun. And by the way, I'm going to be showing you both Wilson Combat firearms today, and I'm going to show you a bunch of guns that are not Wilson Combat firearms today, such as this beautiful little thing, the Springfield. This is one of the Springfield variants of the XD series. This is the XDS. Of course, this is unloaded and cleared. You can't see in that chamber probably because of the light. So we're going to be talking about this gun among other guns. But how do you go about selecting a defensive handgun? What are the things that you need to think about? And here's what I like to tell my students. I like them to follow what I call the REAP acronym. And REAP stands for reliability, ergonomics, accuracy, and power, right? So in terms of reliability, let's say I pick this gun, this smaller version of a Beretta, Wilson Combat Beretta. Is it reliable? So what do I mean by reliable? And when I'm talking about reliable, I'm talking about the ability to take your defensive handgun, whatever you select, go to the range, load a bunch of magazines up, and shoot the gun. And let's say you continually practice over a series of days. Maybe it's a series of weeks if it takes you a little bit longer. But if you have a malfunction with a good magazine and good ammunition within that first, let's say, 1,000 rounds or so, that's an issue for me. So if this gun, I'll select a different gun here. This is one of my original carry guns from Wilson Combat. This is a Sentinel. So this is a Wilson Combat Sentinel called a ULC Sentinel. This is a small micro 1911. It's got thin grips on it. It's got a robust rear sight that I can manipulate the slide. I'll talk about that here in a second. But if I can't take this to the range and shoot it 1,000 or so times, let's say within my practice sessions, and not have a malfunction. And when I say that, I'm talking about specifically a malfunction with good ammunition and decent magazines. And I'm not saying that it would be bad to have a malfunction if you're dropping your magazines and your dust over and over and over again. Eventually, any gun is going to malfunction. But good magazines and good ammunition, it should run 1,000 rounds at a minimum. Okay, so that's R in REAP, reliability. Number 2, ergonomics. What are the ergonomics of the gun? Meaning, or do the ergonomics allow you to manipulate the safety, to manipulate the slide release, to depress the grip safety? For example, if you chose a 1911 style system, when you build a firing grip on the handgun, are you able to depress the grip safety and fire the gun 100% of the time? I know a lot of folks will grab a 1911 system and they grab the gun, they start pulling the trigger, and they're pulling the trigger and pulling the trigger, and the gun's not going off. And the gun's not going off because A, they didn't manipulate the thumb safety, which is also very common for someone that's not familiar with this. But number 2, maybe they didn't depress the grip safety. So do you have the ability to depress the grip safety on the firearm? Ergonomics, does the grip fit your hand okay? Because the last thing you want to do is fight, your defensive handgun. We don't want to go to battle with the defensive handgun. We want to go to battle potentially with the threat out there, not the gun itself. So do the ergonomics allow you to manipulate this? And I'll give you a little war story, by the way. 113 live viewers right now. Good morning, folks, if you're jumping on. My name is Mike Seeklander. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, this live stream is sponsored by Live Fire. That's the training app that you've seen me wear. Check it out. I got my new instructor shirt on. All right. Live Fire. Live Fire, if you haven't checked out Live Fire, you really should. We're about to develop a bunch of modules, a bunch of training modules on Live Fire that will allow you to watch the content that I'm talking about right now in, to an extent, interactive format, and eventually go through the process of getting a Live Fire coach. If you're a brand new shooter, if you know someone that's a brand new shooter that's trying to learn this stuff, check out the Live Fire app. Go to the Apple Store or the Android Store. Look at just Google or look up Live Fire, and you'll find Live Fire. You can actually do it on a web version as well. Join Live Fire. You could do it, I think, for 30 days free. They're doing a free trial right now. All of my training logs are on Live Fire. So if you're not on Live Fire, you got to check it out. Here in a little while, maybe I'll pick up my phone. I'll show you the version of the app. Okay. So anyways, ergonomics. Can you manipulate the safeties and the devices and all the things? And I'll give you a little war story. Let me pick up a different gun and show off something else very, very beautiful. This is my SFX9 compact gun with an optic on it. Now, this is not my full-time carry gun yet, but as soon as I get a rear plate that has a backup iron sight on it, and you're wondering, well, you may be wondering, Mike, why don't you have a backup iron sight on the gun? Because I took this plate and cut the rear sight off it for a competition handgun. It wasn't a carry handgun. So I'm waiting for a plate with the rear sight so I can have a set of lower third co-witness backup iron sights. So we'll talk about optics here in a second. But the point is, war story for you. Went to a class at one point in time and training with a bunch of motivated students, awesome students, and we're doing the extend, prep, and press drill, which is basically a drill where you extend the handgun, you build your firing grip, boom, you fire one shot, right? You unbuild the grip, you extend the handgun, you build the firing grip, you fire one shot. I call it a grip building exercise because you're repetitively extending the handgun, building your grip, firing the gun, and you're learning from what the gun tells you in recoil. Lo and behold, I watched one of the students, and she is extending the handgun, building a pretty darn decent grip, and not firing the gun. Then she came back, and she did the same thing again. She built the grip, extended the handgun, didn't fire the gun. After about the third time of her doing that, I walked down to her and said, "Why are you not firing the gun?" And she said, "Well, Mike, I've got really serious arthritis in my thumb, and I can't wipe the safety on and off." She had a little micro 1911 system. I don't know what it was, maybe a Kimber or something. It was a very small 1911 safety, right? And she couldn't manipulate it because of her arthritis in her thumb. And that's the first thing. I'm like, well, why did you select that handgun? You know the answer. You guess. Type in the comments. What do you think the answer was? If you know the answer, type in the comments. I'll be interested to hear what you think. I'll give it to you here in just a moment, but I got to have a sip of my coffee. Oh, that's so good. And Dan Schreiner, we'll talk about SIGs here in just a second. I see a bunch of people on. Vicky, good morning. How are you? Coin number 2186. John Dent from Alabama. Hello, John. How are you, sir? Nice to see you as well. William Hollenbeck, good morning. I think we emailed back and forth, man, about the Nationals or something. Dan Schreiner, talk about that in a second. Scott Loomis, pretty. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Dan Brady hit it on the head, man. You are exactly right. Dan Brady says it's what the gun store guy told her to get, right? And that was the answer. She said, I bought this gun because this is the one the gun store guy told me to get. Don't you think that gun store guy had the responsibility of taking that firearm, showing her the devices, the safeties, the manipulation devices? For example, in her case, the thumb safety, and said, hey, can you manipulate that thumb safety on and off? If you can't manipulate the thumb safety on and off, you probably shouldn't own that firearm. So anyways, back on track. Reliability, the REAP acronym, defensive handgun selection. R, reliability. Number 2, E, ergonomics. Number 3, accuracy. How accurate does a defensive handgun have to be? So that's my question for you. If you know the answer, type it in the comments. Here's the question. How accurate does a defensive handgun have to be? Think about that for a second, right? I want to tell you, I want to ask you, I want to see if you know. Take a second to analyze defensive handgunning and answer the question. Type your answer in the comments. I want to see what kind of answers I get from that. How accurate, in terms of the REAP test, does a defensive handgun have to be? Let's see what kind of answers we get. But good morning, by the way, Paul Healy. Give up your revolver and move back to the 1911 SFX9. Wow. You're giving up your revolver, Paul. Wow. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And Mikal, 19. So Gil says extremely. Craig says minute of man. I don't know what minute of man is, Craig. Sheila says 1,000,000%. Sheila wasn't accurate. I was not asking how reliable. I was asking how accurate a handgun has to be. And Tina says, ladies in her group say they chose a gun because it's popular. That's very, I hate to say it. And by the way, the female demographic is the largest growing demographic in gun ownership on the planet right now, as far as I know. Oftentimes, females select guns because they like it. It feels good in their hand, or they like how it looks. Now, I'm not necessarily, by the way, for all you girls with guns that are watching this right now, saying that's all wrong. I'm just saying we have to balance and weight the fact that you like the gun and it looks good with the fact that you have good ergonomics and good reliability and other things as well. Now, if we balance those two things and have this discussion, which is what this live stream is all about, you are good to go. Okay. And I don't see a bunch more answers about accuracy. Practice makes perfect. More accurate than you is what I'm seeing. 1,000% can't have an errant round. I like all those answers, but I'm actually asking, how accurate does a defensive handgun have to be? Give me a metric, and not a saying, not a phrase. Give me an actual metric. How accurate does a defensive handgun have to be? And then I'm going to tell you how I might break it down and how we may look at, a standard production gun that you could buy off any gun shelf and say, okay, that's accurate enough. Because remember, we're talking about the REAP test: reliability, ergonomics, accurate, and power, accuracy and power, right? And these all of these things kind of mean something. So Paul says 6 inches at 21 feet. Taylor says 3 MOA at 20 yards. Greg says 3 inches at 10 yards. Tony says 2 MOA at 25. Oh, wow. So those are some good answers. So here's how I came up with the answer. And by the way, there's no answer. There's no Mike Seeklander answer. But here's how I came up with it, right? So let's say we get into a defensive encounter. What distance is the defensive counter going to be? And I could tell you 99% of defensive encounters that you might be engaged in, 99% of the time that you have to grab a handgun and shoot at someone, it's going to be 10 yards or less. So let's just say, because we know the distance is going to be 10 yards or less, let's double it. Let's say, okay, no, we're going to have to shoot to 20 yards, right? Now, at that 10 yards or less, to shoot a combat effective shot in the upper center chest or the lower pelvic area or the head, we're talking about three distinct areas. The combat effective area on the human body is about an 8-inch circle, upper center chest. If you have to take a headshot, it's probably a circle that's about 3 inches on the front or the side or the back of the head in order to fire and hit a spot that may effectively stop someone. The lower body area or the pelvic area is probably the same thing. So let's take the smaller of those numbers. Let's take 3 inches. So my answer, if we double the distance and go to 20 yards, is 3 inches at 20 yards is going to be completely adequate as a defensive handgun. Now, the question is for you, will the average production gun, let's show you this one, and two great variants. By the way, not Wilson Combat. See, I own guns other than Wilson Combat. Will these two production type guns, right? This small XD variant, this is an XDS, right? Will this gun shoot 3 inches at 20 yards? And I have not group tested this particular firearm, but I would tell you, I guess yes. I would say probably about a 95% chance that this gun with good ammo will shoot 3 inches at 20 yards. What about the small shield? This is actually the M&P Shield EZ version. This is a 2.0. Will this gun shoot 3 inches at 20 yards? And when I say 3 inches at 20 yards, I'm talking about 3 inches at 20 yards with good ammunition. You know, ammunition that shoots well to the gun. And I would say yes. So my answer to you in terms of the accuracy part of the retest is almost every factory handgun that's well made in a primary manufacturer, Smith & Wesson, Wilson Combat, Springfield, SIG, all the variants, they will probably all meet that accuracy requirement. So let's talk about the last one. And by the way, if you're jumping on and joining me, my name is Mike Seeklander. For those of you that are new to this, we're talking about defensive handgun selection and setup. And I'm going to get into a bunch of things like optics and stuff like that. By the way, if you haven't clicked the share button, if you're new to this, if you would share it to your Facebook wall or share it to a group you're a member of or share it to your Girls with a Gun group, that'd be great because we want to get more viewers. I'd like to beat 150. We have 138 people on. So if everybody shares right now, and I know I ask that every time because I love to get more people on. If everybody shares right now, we're going to bust through 150 like that. Okay. So REAP, last but not least, power. REAP, power. How powerful does your defensive handgun have to be? Instead of a 9mm, this is a Glock 19 variant by Wilson Combat, by the way. And if you look at the red barrel, that's actually a Cool Fire barrel. They're one of my show sponsors as well. If you don't know what a Cool Fire is, you replace the barrel and recoil spring in your handgun, and you can fire it and you get felt recoil. In this case, I don't have the Cool Fire barrel filled up because I moved, and I don't know where my Cool Fire barrel filling barrels are because everything's in boxes right now. But the point is, power. How powerful does this have to be? Is 9mm okay, right? What about 40? Should I have a 40? Should I have a 45? Maybe should I have a 46, right? And you're saying, Mike, what's a 46? I don't know what a 46 is, but if they make a 45, they should make a 46. Here's the bottom line. Here's my answer to that question. The current manufacturers that are making defensive handgun ammunition in 9mm caliber, if you ballistically test those, some of the stuff the FBI is carrying right now, and they did the ballistic testing, it ballistically tests comparable to 45 ACP, right? So if I get ballistics like that from 9mm, for me, in most defensive situations, I'm going to carry a 9mm. Now, that may change based on what I'm doing. If I go to Montana, if I go to Missoula, Montana, or Bozeman, Montana to hang out with the Todd Orr, my cousin, who was mauled by a grizzly bear twice, Google his name, look him up. I might very well carry something different than a 9mm. I may switch to a Glock variant in 10mm or 45 ACP. I may grab one of my 1911s in 45 ACP and carry some souped up, 230 grain ball ammunition that's going to expand and penetrate at the same time, or some variant that will work against bears, right? So the power requirement in REAP is kind of dependent on what you're doing and where you are. But for me, if you look at my carry gun, which is very similar to this particular gun right here, ULC Sentinel, although mine's actually a compact CQB right now. And I may change that, by the way. We'll talk about why I'm carrying a 9mm. I have 10 rounds in the gun, and I have 10 rounds in a spare magazine. By the way, as a defensive handgun shooter that's a civilian and not in law enforcement or military that's going to a serious situation or an active shooter situation, how many rounds are necessary, right? How many rounds are fired on the average? And I can tell you it's probably about 5 rounds. Now, is a higher capacity gun, a double stack carry gun, a better gun? Maybe if you can deal with the weight of the additional ammo or whatever else, that's fine. I have no problem with that. Remember, ultimately, your defensive handgun selection is up to you because it's your handgun selection. It's not mine, it's yours. For me, I carry 10 rounds in the gun, and I carry 10 rounds in a spare magazine. In the very near future, the second I get this rear plate and I shoot this gun about another probably 500 or so rounds, this gun, this SFX9, is going to be my carry gun. I love it. And I love the fact that it has an optic on it. So let's talk about that next. Let me see if I have any questions I can answer real quick, right? Daniel, let's see. Let me go back just a little bit here. 4 inches at 20 yards, Ted says, yeah. Average accuracy might be about 50% in defense situation. Linda, you're exactly right. And by the way, when I say 3 inches at 20 yards, and Cody, you almost nailed it on the head, I'm not talking about your ability to perform that level of accuracy under stress. I'm talking about what the handgun can do. What you do under stress in a defensive situation is completely based on your practice and your training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. David says his new SIG 365 XL with optics is accuracy with wife and daughter. The eye doctor had told me it's not the glass of your eyes. The wife and 15-year-old daughter can hit dead center at 15 yards. You being a 7-year-old, you have to be happy with the 6-inch pipe. I'm fine with that, David. And by the way, we'll talk about optics here in a second. And Esteban, subtitles in Spanish, please. I don't know how to do subtitles in Spanish, Esteban. You're going to have to tell me how to do that, man. Probably won't do it for this particular show. Daniel says 4570 government pistol. Vicky, 4546, whatever it takes. I like that. Yep. Hey, John Dent, is this broadcast repeated? So this broadcast lives on Facebook, so you can go back to Facebook. You can rewind it. You can watch it again. I believe IDPA posts it on their YouTube page. And I used to post the full broadcast on my YouTube page as well, and I may do that in the future. I'm actually going to edit this one down. You can also follow me on Instagram, and I'll chop it up into little tips, okay? Brian, the acronym is REAP, R-E-A-P, reliability, ergonomics, accuracy, and power. I use that acronym to assess defensive handgun. So let's address the elephant that is in the room. And by the way, thankfully, there's not actually an elephant in the room because my room is not that big. Hey, how's my sound back here? Someone say, sounds great way back there, Mike, or not good. By the way, looks like I got some light coming through that window. I could probably fix that. I actually have a curtain here. Watch this fanciness. This office is kind of cool, but there's a point where, look at that. The sun comes through this window. So if I'm in here trying to work right about 8 a.m., it literally beams me in the eye. So I'm sitting here at my desk and I got to cover it up. So here, let's talk about, and Sandra says there's a little bit of echoes. Yeah, there's probably going to be some echo in this room. It's a big high ceiling room and I have nothing behind me. So I'll make some improvements there, I promise you. So let's address the elephant in the room. Should we carry a handgun with an optic on it? And this seems to be probably the fastest growing competitive division in both IDPA and USPSA. And I'm talking about the carry optics division. It's also probably the fastest growing trend in handgunning, specifically defensive handgunning. Should we carry a handgun with an optic on it, right? Now, here's the answer that oftentimes I hear. Yes, Mike, we should carry a handgun with an optic on it because we have eyes that are aging and we can't see the front sight clearly enough. right? So the average end user, the average gun owner says, I can't see the front sight clearly enough, so I can't aim the handgun well enough. So I need to carry a gun with an optic on it. So I'm going to put a gun with an optic on it. And here's what I've seen. Not you all. You all watching this probably are smart enough not to do this. It's someone that is not taking the time to educate themselves and watch a live stream or watch a video or be a member or whatever else that will do this. They decide to put an optic on a handgun. So they go buy the cheapest variant they can find. They mount the optic in the dovetail where the rear sight used to be on a very high centered plate. So now they take an optic and put it on their handgun, and it's mounted about a half an inch higher, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, than their normal iron sights would have been. And then they maybe think about replacing the battery, maybe not, and they expect themselves to be able to find the dot under stress in weird positions with one or two hands. And that person goes to class and they bring their fancy handgun with their fancy optic on it. And the first drill we do, they're doing this the entire time. I call that the dot lasso. Boom. That's the dot lasso. You know why they're doing the dot lasso? Because they can't find the dot. Because they haven't spent literally minutes every day is all it takes doing this. Find the dots. Find the dots. Find the dot. Find the dot. And here's my secret for you in terms of optics. If you can find the target in the window, right? So if that's the window of the optic, if you can find the target in the window, you'll find the dot. So put the target in the center of the window, you'll find the dot. Now this dot is hard for me to angle up or down or right or left in terms of the dot itself. But if you can find the target in the window, you'll find the dot. And that end user does that. So should you put an optic on the sights? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to bust some myths here. Here's a question for you. Can we aim a handgun? Listen to the question. Can we aim an iron-sighted handgun without clearly focusing on the front sight? That's your question. If you have an answer, type it in the comments. Can we aim an iron-sighted handgun without clearly focusing or having the ability to focus on the front sight? I would like to know what your answer is. Tony says yes. See what you need to see. John says, of course. Brian says yes. Goldie says yes. Craig says yes. Yes. If you're answering yes, you are exactly right. First of all, we should be careful what we say because sometimes our family members and our students here focus on the front sight, and that is the wrongest, stupidest things we as instructors have said across time. You got to focus on the front sight. Well, guess what focusing on the front sight tells our students to do? It tells our students to look at the front sight. I'm focusing on the front sight, sir, all day long, right? So what we need to do is we need to say, how do we verify alignment of the handgun? Now, at this distance, right, to verify the alignment of the handgun, if the target is my camera, I just literally need to point the gun, like my finger. I can tell you right now, the finger is pointed right at the camera. Guess what? My finger doesn't have sights on it. So how do I know how to do that? You can do the same thing with me right now. Go ahead, point the finger at me. Boom. I got a hit. Boom. Got another hit. Boom. I'm hitting you every single time without sights at all. So I can learn that I can point the handgun directly at the camera every single time without sights, right? Because I'm only a few yards away. Now, if I'm like way back here, this is probably closer to 3 or 4 yards. You know, can I do the same thing all day long? But there's a distance where to verify the alignment of the handgun, I do need to utilize the top of the slide or the sighting systems, which might be the front sight and the rear sight notch. Now, here's the deal, though. If you take your fingers and you make a little front sight like this, that's your front sight, and this is your rear sight, you can verify alignment. Like take your vision and look out at the wall somewhere. So now your front sight, your finger should be slightly blurry, right? That's okay. You can tell if the front sight is aligned in the rear sight notch, if it's blurry. If I'm looking at the camera right now, right, my front sight is blurry because I can't visually focus on the front sight anymore. But right now, I can tell you that the gun is aimed directly at the camera, right? Now the gun is aimed to the left of the camera. Now the gun is aimed to the right of the camera. Now the gun is aimed high. Now the gun is aimed low. So the point is, we shouldn't switch to an optic simply because we can't focus on the front sight. That's not a requirement to get a good hit. If you're having visual difficulty, you should consider getting a very bright, robust front sight that probably is a variant of a fiber optic. And I just said a fiber optic, not a night sight. This particular gun has a night sight front sight. We'll talk about that in a second. And that's going to allow you to see the front sight very, very, very quickly and compare it to the rear sight notch. Now they make sighting systems, I think the XS sighting system, a variety of sighting systems that are big, bright, robust. Some of them are night sight and day sight combinations, and they're very easy to align in the rear sight. They may not be a rear sight notch. Some of them are a V or whatever else. But the point is, simply not being able to focus on the front sight does not warrant a switch to an optic. Now, I will tell you, by the way, and yeah, I am left-eye dominant. Hey, Tim Heron is on. Good morning, little Tim Heron. How are you, buddy? You better be sharing this live stream, you little jerk. Nice to see you, man. Tim Heron is a top shooter. He's on right now. He's one of my buddies, a long time ago alumni. And let me make sure I'm not missing any questions. Hey, Chris Edwards, how are you, sir? Good morning. Kimori Kia Wajuma. Man, that's a freaking incredible name, Kimori. I love that name. That's awesome, man. John Grory watching, you could say. You said left-eye dominant. Yes, I am. Okay, I don't see any pertinent questions. I'll go back and do some cues here in just a second. So the point is, the other day I had finished shooting, and by the way, I have my Carry Optics handguns. Oh, hold on. I'll show you my couple. These are my Carry Optics handguns that I'm competing with right now, right? This is they're both Sig Wilson Combat variants with the slides. Of course, you see I've recently switched to an SRO. We'll talk about optics here briefly in a second. This has the Sig Wilson Combat lower module and frame. This has the heavy one made by Sig itself. So this is the tungsten infused lower. These are the guns I'm shooting most often right now because I'm actually transitioning over to Carry Optic for a while. And by the way, I am absolutely having a blast. I understand why Carry Optics is one of the fastest growing divisions or sports out there, divisions in the sports, because it's so fun. It's literally just so fun. And I'm really, really, really enjoying shooting these handguns. So the other day, I'll give you an example. I finished practice, and I've been shooting Carry Optic pretty serious for several weeks now. And, you know, full disclosure, I go back years of shooting a gun with an optic on it in some variety, shape, or form. Open guns back in the day with the Seymour, Carry Optic type setups. I shot one of the original Carry Optics Nationals the first year the Carry Optics division and USPSA came out. So I've been doing this for a long, long time, but I shoot a lot of course, 1911. I shoot a lot of single stack 1911 and a lot of iron sights, which requires me to wear corrected vision on my left eye because I'm left eye dominant. Anyways, the other day, I get done practicing with my Carry Optics, and as is common with my end of practice, I put my carry gun back on, and I do a few draws. You know, I put my hands up, and I do a draw. I do a flashlight draw, one-handed. I do a few defensive handgun draws. I'm always doing my defensive handgun draws. And I was amazed at how when I drew my handgun, which is a variant of this ULC, right? It's actually a compact CQB. I'm like, whoa, you know, there's the sights. I see the iron sights. I'm not going to not see the iron sights, but they're certainly not clear. And my brain was looking for an optic. So let's talk about keeping your carry system within a family of guns. What I mean by that is, let's say this is my competition gun, and I'm spending all kinds of time competing, practicing, and dry firing. If you're a competitor, if you're not a competitor, this doesn't matter, with this gun, right? So I spend lots and lots of hours of pointing this type gun. Now, if I went back to a carry system like this, I am not going to be able to verify alignment and aim the gun as effectively or fast because the angles of these two guns are slightly different. Now, let's amp that up a notch. If I decided, well, Mike, you're shooting a Carry Optics setup all the time in a SIG 320 variant like this with this grip angle. Let's go ahead and carry a handgun with an optic on it, like this beautiful SFX9. Does that make sense? Well, certainly it makes sense if you think about it initially. It's a gun with an optic on it. I'm practicing with a gun with an optic on it. So why would there be a downside? And I will tell you, this is not a definitive downside, but if this grip angle is definitively different than this grip angle, that's what you have to consider and think about. You have to consider and think about the fact that, when you're presenting the handgun under stress at speed, and if I did, let's just say any given week, I did 2,000 repetitions of extensions with my competition handgun, the SIG 320. Now my body and my wrists and my hands are learning this angle, right? I should have this gun up, right? This angle to find the dot. And then if I try to translate that to this gun, it may be different. Now, if the angles are generally the same, let's say I do a lot of repetitions with my competition gun, and I could take this gun and I could point it, and the dot is right there. You're good to go. Keep the angle the same. But I would recommend for most of you keeping the competition and defensive handgun family the same. So which is exactly why for many years now, I've carried a 1911. I carry a compact 1911 with an aluminum frame made by Wesson Combat. Of course, as you all probably know, I'm sponsored by Wesson Combat. Hey, and we busted 160 live viewers, which is super cool, by the way. That's awesome. But I carried a 1911 simply because I was competing so much with a 1911 in both the IDPA ESP division as well as USPSA single stack division. So it made sense that I was carrying a 1911 because that's the grip angle and the sights and everything that I see on a regular basis. Why not make it easiest for me in my defensive classes and situations or encounters, if I were to get into one, right, than to carry something different? Now, I'm shooting a SIG 320 in competition a ton now. I transitioned over to carry optic. This might be a viable option. Now, this is a compact SIG 320, maybe a little bit big and a little bit heavy, but I might carry a variant of a compact 320. Now, in this case, I won't carry this gun, right? I won't carry this particular gun. And the reason I won't carry this particular gun is because I carry my handgun in the appendix position. So my gun is right here. And I'm not, and this is a personal decision. This is not a decision I recommend you mimic, but think about this. I am not a fan of carrying a striker-fired handgun in the appendix position that doesn't have a manual safety. Now, if I had this variant, this is, by the way, this is a modified compact 320 with a Wesson Combat top end. This is an old 320 compact I had from SIG, and then I sent it to Wesson Combat, and they did all this fancy stuff for me, which is very, very beautiful. But the point is, for me to carry this handgun, I would want the 320 variant, or someone earlier said that you carry a 365 XL. I would carry the 365 XL with the manual safety on it. As long as it has a robust manual safety that I can wipe on and off, I would be good to go. And I'll show you, well, let's see here. A great example, I'm losing track of my guns, is this. Not a Wesson Combat. Now, this is Smith & Wesson Shield EZ 2.0, right? But it has a very robust, very easy to manipulate ambi manual safety. Now, Smith & Wesson made this with a grip safety as well. Is a grip safety a good or bad thing? If it's designed well, it's probably a good thing. In this case, I don't know if they made this so this gun can be sold in California, because a lot of times what these gun manufacturers do is they add things like a grip safety. I give you a great example. The grip safety on the XDS is a byproduct of an additional safety feature that allows them to sell this gun in different places, from what I've been told, right? This doesn't have a manual safety. So would I personally carry this handgun? Probably not. Would I put this handgun in a home defense safe with the weapon mounted light on it? Probably so. And that's me. If you're carrying in the appendix position and you carry a striker fire pistol that doesn't have a manual safety, that's fine. Go for it. Do it. It's up to you. You're the one carrying the gun, not me. But this would be a great little carry gun. By the way, this gun shoots good. I haven't shot these guns a ton. I bought it probably a year or two ago and shot a little bit. So far, I'm highly impressed with this particular gun. Of course, I'm carrying Wilson Comets because they're my sponsor. All right, so let me see what I have in terms of questions. I can't believe we busted 150. That is fantastic. I got a bunch of questions. Let me go through them all here. Kinesthetic alignment. Love that. Oh, yeah, Paul, I hear you're saying that World War II, 1911. You're right. Those sights, metal abrasion, the sights, they're teeny tiny little bumps on top of the gun, right? But you'd be surprised at how well you can aim a handgun based on your the myelination of your pointing experience anyways, meaning you've been pointing in 1911 probably for some time, which means that even though the sights aren't quite as robust and you can't read them as well in terms of Paul's question, you can still do okay. Ed asked if I shoot with both eyes open. I do all of my shooting with both eyes open. I'm always aiming the handgun, of course. What do I aim with? As you can see, I'm left eye dominant. But you don't see a lot of contortion of my head. I simply take the gun, I put it directly in front of my left eye, keep both eyes open. My brain has learned to ignore the image from my right eye. And you may be wondering, because we're having this, well, Mike, what do you do with a rifle? Well, I shoot a rifle and aim it with whichever side it's on, because I can't get the other eye in front of the optic. But my brain knows, hey, if the stock is touching my cheek here, use this eye. If the stock is touching the cheek here, use that eye. If the handgun's in front of your face, use your left eye. So I use a left eye dominant aiming procedure, and I keep both eyes open. Now, for those, Ed asked the question, is it wrong to squint an eye, to aim a handgun? If you need to squint or close an eye, is that wrong? No, that's not wrong. A lot of people say that's wrong. I prefer my defensive shooters keep both eyes open, because then we have good peripheral vision. But the reality is, if you're in a situation where the aiming is very, very difficult and you need to take a second to squint or close an eye to clearly see the sights and focus on the front side of the rear sight notch with an iron-sighted handgun, well, then do so. That's perfectly okay. It's not necessarily wrong. Just understand, when you close an eye, you're losing some of your peripheral vision, okay? Ted asked, what do you look for in terms of trigger distance, proper fit, hand size, or whatever else? In rifles, it's been a common measure. That's a good question. I'm a fan, and most of the guns that I have are pretty similar in terms of trigger distance. The shorter the distance between the back of the grip and my trigger finger, meaning the more my finger is at this angle, the slower I can pull the trigger. So I'm a fan of a longer, either flatter or more robust trigger. But most of the trigger distances on these handguns is very, very similar. Like the trigger distance on this gun is exactly the same as this SFX9, right? Now, if I go to a variety like this, well, the trigger distance is certainly different here until I fire the gun for the first shot, and then the slide cycles, and now my trigger finger angles at a different distance. But I don't worry a lot about that. If you notice, when I'm pulling the trigger, though, this is the direction I'm pulling the trigger. This part of my trigger finger is isolated, right? I'm not doing this. I'm not moving the gun like this. I'm pulling the trigger just like this, straight to the rear. So I can hit the front edge of the trigger, not to get too far into grip trigger sights, and pull the trigger hard, if that makes sense. Okay. Will you ever do DDC again? Will? Well, this is kind of like the DDC, but Will is asking about the daily dry fire challenge. Will I ever do the DDC? I think the answer might be yes. I think it's going to be in a little bit different format, probably sponsored by Live Fire, in a studio that once you see the Live Fire studio, you get. It's like the Peloton of firearms. Wait till you see what's coming. I'll just give you a little hint right there. SFX9 from IDC. Paul, you are exactly right. I completely agree with that. Let's see here. Hello, Brian Schuler. I thought Brian Schuler. Yeah, Brian says he contributed to the 150 viewers. Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate that. So good question. So Tim asked, why would I not carry in the appendix position with a manual safety? Let me say this one more time on the live stream very, very clearly for those that are watching, and maybe we'll chop this up in Instagram. I am just not a fan let's talk about this. And I heard this actually. I talked to Ernest Langdon about this a long time ago, and he said, Mike, you think about that in terms of carrying a striker-fired pistol. A striker-fired pistol that is cocked, right, has the striker in this handgun is already slightly tensioned, right? Now, in theory, if it has active firing pin block mechanisms, et cetera, the firing pin is blocked and it can't fly forward and hit the primer. But the point is the striker is already slightly tensioned. In order to fire the gun, when I pull the trigger, that continues to tension the striker even farther, and eventually it releases the striker to hit the bullet. So for me to have a slightly tensioned striker and no manual safety except for the firing pin block safety, and whatever we would call this, which is the trigger safety, which in theory blocks the trigger from being pulled. I understand it's an additional safety, was just a little iffy in the appendix position. I much prefer a manual safety on a handgun, like a physical manual safety. So once the manual safety is on, such in this 1911 device, I can't make the gun go off. So for me, it's a personal choice. Hear me clearly, it's completely a personal choice. That's my reason. I just didn't like carrying in the appendix position. I can imagine myself seated at my desk or in my car, where the gun is pointing. It's pointing down at my leg, which is certainly a bad position if the gun went off. I want it to be pretty robust. And I've carried or drawn a 1911 with the grip safety active and the thumb safety on probably millions of times now. And never has the hammer ever fallen or whatever else. If it did, from my perspective, and I'm not saying this is for everybody, if it accidentally fell, it would fall to the half cock notch. That's what the half cock notch on the 1911 is for. So when the hammer falls without the trigger being pulled, it falls to the half cock notch and doesn't hit the firing pin. To be honest with you, and we don't make guns like this because it makes the trigger pull harder. The old Series 80 had a firing pin block, and the slide itself, when you pull the trigger, there was a little lever that went up and it actually moved a firing pin block out of the way. I would not have a problem with the 1911 style system that had a firing pin block as well for a defensive handgun, carry handgun. Okay, so that's why I don't carry the striker fired pistol in the appendix position, if that makes any sense. Okay. Brandon says that the double action is great for AI. Yeah, so, if you look, Ernest Langdon, Brandon Powers, myself, a 1911 with a manual safety, right? A striker-fired pistola with a manual safety, right? So, for example, I will probably have a SIG. Don't know what I did with my SIG. I will probably have a SIG 365 or 320 with a manual safety on it as a carry gun in the future. Yes, I will probably have an optic on it because, as we talked about earlier, I'm shooting and practicing so much with an optic. It's very, very easy for me to find the dot because I spend so much time. Now, if you decide to go with an optic on your handgun, you gotta spend the time finding the dot, right? You gotta spend the time finding the dot, right? So a double action first shotgun, striker fired pistol. I got guns all over the place here, or some variety like that. By the way, for those of you that are transitioning to an optic, when I say find the dot, I'm just talking about aim the handgun, put the dot in the center of the target, right? Come off the target, aim the dot, or find the dot. When I say that, if you miss this, if the camera is the target, so you're the target, right? I'm just going to find the target in the window of the optic. If I find the target in the window, I'll find the dot. Fully extend your handgun. Find the target in the window. You'll find your dot. There's some things to think about. Okay. Let me check for additional questions, folks. Almost 8:30. I got to go do my workout here in a second. Gilly says, would you carry a striker fired pistol appendix if it had a manual safety? Yes. Yeah, Gilly, 100%. And that's probably what I will carry in the very near future, if that makes sense. Okay. Brian says you brought a PX4. I almost brought Beretta P Explorer customized by Ernest on the show this morning, but I forgot it's upstairs in the gun safe right now. I love that. I think that would be a fantastic idea. Willa, you said the DDC really helped your shooting get up to speed every day. Maybe we will go back to DDC. I guarantee I will go back to a variety of DDC. For those of you who don't know, if you're not on Livefire, you should get on Livefire, because in the very near future, there will be a DDC version of Livefire where I'll be going live on Livefire. And it will be it'll be not just me, but other instructors as well, as we bring people in that we trust. There will be that experience. It'll be like Peloton on steroids with a gun. Gilly says you can't trust a pistol without a manual safety. I don't know about that entirely, but I won't carry one in the appendix position. Yeah. Brian asks the lowest caliber. Brian, I'm going to have to default to 9mm. Now, I'm not saying that I wouldn't be okay with, for example, my parents-in-law, very arthritic in their hands. They're older. They have one of the shields that's made in the 380 variant because it has much lighter spring. And speaking of springs, now that I mentioned that, a lot of folks want to carry these little teeny tiny micro compact cool pistols. And then I see a lot of students go to the range with those pistols and they're like, I can't move the slide, Mike. Well, you can't move the slide because the spring is stiffer. It has to be stiffer in a smaller compact variant in order for it to function well. So the smaller guns are not easy to shoot, and they're not easy to manipulate. So for those that are selecting, and if you know someone, the cute little guns, because they're cute and they're little, go shoot them. Go manipulate them on the range. It's much like the revolver folks are like, your revolver, it works all the time. And then they go and they can't hit the target with the revolver. They miss. I tell, and there's some great revolver shooters probably watching this live stream right now. But you want to carry a revolver, go take the revolver, load it with 5 shots, because it's probably going to be a little snub-nosed revolver. Put it in your support hand, get 5 yards from the target and hit the target 5 times. I dare you. If you can do that, you could probably carry that revolver. 9 out of 10 times, people can't do that, by the way. Okay. So Doug asked about trigger pull for everybody. Hey, there's Bayor. My mom's on. Good morning, Mom. So trigger pull is variable. It depends. I would tell you that the manufacturers for these handguns are setting the guns up in a manner where they're very reliable. They want their guns to work. If you buy a major manufactured handgun, they care about reliability. So the engineers set up the springs and everything else so the gun feeds, cycles, and works. For the average shooter, honestly, that's probably making mistakes on the grip. So I tend to say that I leave the trigger stock. I leave the trigger as is. I'm not saying it's wrong. And by the way, I don't think you'll have to go to court and defend a trigger if you were to clean up a trigger a little bit. But I would tell you, that adding a super light competition trigger, like on this bad boy for a carry handgun, is probably not a good idea, right? I want a trigger weight that allows me to shoot it fast and accurately, but at the same time, if you get into the foot, you know what the foot is, right? The fouled up tangle. You get into the foot and you're bumping and everything's bumping into the trigger, and maybe you don't have a manual safety, it's less likely to go off. And more importantly, a standard trigger with standard springs and everything else is probably going to be very reliable, and it may be defendable in court. I don't know about that. I actually wrote about that in my first defensive handgun book. It's laying around here somewhere. And I had a bunch of folks contact me and say, Mike, that's not really true. There's not a lot of court cases out there that have been problematic. If you use force legally, you're using force legally, your trigger weight probably doesn't matter. But I generally recommend sticking to a stock trigger weight, assuming the trigger weight is a decent trigger weight. Let's just call a 3 to 5 pound trigger. 3 might be a little bit on the light side for some people. 5 might be a little heavy feeling for some of you competitive shooters, but it's probably okay. Okay. Yeah, Bill Morgan, you only shoot Glocks and staccatos and triggers don't need work. That's probably true. That's probably absolutely true. Okay. I agree with that, John, as far as double action practice first. Okay. Okay, I don't see any additional questions. Oh, TC, trusted outside instructors. I don't know. That's hard to say. I haven't taken the classes from a lot of these other instructors. Ernest Langman has a good reputation. He's a buddy of mine. JJ certainly knows his stuff. JJ used to work for me as an instructor in the FAM program. I can't not say good things about JJ Racaza. I would trust him all day long. A buddy of mine with a major metropolitan police department that probably isn't watching this, Chris, would be a fantastic instructor. He's one of the best instructors in humans I've ever met. I think if he taught classes, I would go to him, but I'd have to get you a list, TC. Okay, so I want to mention one last thing before we get off here, and then we'll do some Q's and A's. So this gun has night sights on it. So I set this gun up originally for the backup gun division, and a lot of times in the backup gun division in the IDPA Indoor Nationals, we had low light stages. So I'm like, I want a robust set of night sights for this particular gun for that match, and this is going to be my carry gun. So the last thing I want to talk about is sights. Now, in terms of a robust sighting system, I like a fixed rear sight system that allows me to manipulate the rear sight, for example, off of a belt, or a quarter of a pocket or whatever else. But are night sights required? Should we have night sights if you choose an iron-sighted handgun for carry purposes? There's your question. Answer the question in the comments. Should we have night sights on the handgun? Or maybe, are they mandatory? Maybe that's a better way of asking it. Are night sights mandatory on an iron-sighted pistola? By the way, if you have any other questions, you can throw them up there as well, and I'll try to address them. I got to get off here pretty darn soon, and I got to get a workout done. 70-pound trigger. Tony says no. Bill says not necessarily. Bill Morgan says yes. Let's see what else we get in terms of answers. Are night sights required on a carry gun? Should they be mandatory? Linda says not mandatory. Wade says no. Tina, yes, advisable since many encounters happen at night. Personal preference, Mr. Brandon Power. They're not mandatory, especially any kind of ambient light. Good flashlight. So, yeah, okay. Dan says not necessarily. Not mandatory, not really. I like your answers. You're right. So let's break this down. The last tip I'm going to give you, then we'll get into some Q&A, is do you need to put night sights on your carry handgun? And here's what you're going to find out if you test this. And there's no way for me to show this in this room because I can't get the light low enough that you could actually see me. But in order for these night sights on this gun to be robust enough where I can see and aim with those 3 dots, right? And by the way, if you look at the sights on that particular handgun, you can see the 3 dots that are all night sight variants or tritium night sights. For me to see the night sights, it would have to be so dark in this room for them to glow that if I had a person, let's say I stuck a buddy back in the closet or across the room or whatever else, you would not be able to identify what they had in their hands. So my answer in terms of the night sight question is no, they are absolutely not mandatory. As a matter of fact, if I had to choose on a defensive handgun between robust front fiber optic sight and a robust rear sight that allowed me to see the fiber optic faster, I would choose, wait for it, the fiber optic front sight, because we say civilian shooties are almost always in the dark or at night or whatever else, but they are not, if you look at the statistics, in low light. They don't happen in low light. They happen in a gas station with bright ambient light. And because for me to use these night sights, it would have to be dark enough that I would have to use a flashlight. I would have to have some sort of flashlight to identify the threat. Hey, what do you have in your hands? So if I'm going to have a flashlight anyways, I don't necessarily care as much about the night sights. Now, for those of you that have night sights on your carry gun or your duty guns, like, oh my gosh, they're okay. That's fine. But for me, I would rather have a robust fiber optic that's going to be much clearer and easier to pick up in ambient light or daylight, which is probably very, very common for a self-defense shooting, than night sights. I would pick that instead. So they're not mandatory. Are they bad if you have them? No. If you have a variant that are both night and daytime sights, like there's some manufacturers that make a fiber optic front sight that's also tritium, and it has some tritium beneath it. To me, that actually is a part of the market that should be expanded more. There should be more sights like that out there. That's the final version that I would probably choose in that case. But no, they're not mandatory or even necessary, because night sights don't glow until it gets dark enough where you would absolutely have to use a flashlight to identify. And for those later on that are watching this on Facebook or whatever else that are the tactical experts and say, if they're in my house, I'm going to shoot them. If they're in my yard, I'm going to kill them. Well, good for you. When you go to court and go to prison, write me a letter, and then you can tell me why you went to prison, because you did not identify the threat that was in your home when you shot the teenager, right? The mentally challenged teenager that walked in the wrong door that you left unlocked at night, or the drunk teenager that was on your property that you probably, because of the castle doctrine, had a legal right to shoot, but shouldn't have anyway. So there you go. Night sights are not a requirement on a defensive handgun. They're not wrong and they're not bad, but they're not a requirement, in my opinion. Let's see what else I have. I was told by the Americans that we would expel you from Norgo. I'm not even sure. Hey, sir, how are you, buddy? I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about, but you can message me if you want to. Okay. Goldie says you have glow-in-the-dark night sights on your SE. Yeah. All right. Good answers, folks. All right. So 104 live people still on. 8:40 a.m. I got to go work out. I got to do some dry fire. I got to do some training. If you have a question about defensive handgunning, anything we covered today, we covered a lot, folks. We talked about a lot. I showed you some really awesome little iron-sighted handguns. I showed you my robust SFX9 that once I get a backup iron sight on this bad boy, one of the most shootable guns I own. Why I use the REAP test in selecting a defensive handgun: reliability, ergonomics, accuracy, and power, right? Why, if I were competing and training a ton with this particular firearm, I might select another firearm like this as a carry firearm, maybe a compact variant with a manual safety. But personally, why I don't carry a striker-fired pistol in the appendix position. Talked about all that. If you see this later on, or if you're just jumping on and you're wondering what Mike Seeklander is talking about, go ahead and rewind the video and watch that bad boy from the very start, and you're going to learn a bunch about defensive handgun. Let's see what we have in terms of questions. Mr. John Reenan, I have some ones later in the year, California, nothing locally. Hey, but those of you that are kind of close to Oklahoma, I just did find a cool range that a buddy of mine runs, Eric Fusion, that I will be starting to schedule classes at in the very near future. But nothing that's too close to you, John. But you can come up, we'll do a private, man. Gilly, that's a great question. Should we consider the ammo capacity of the pistol when picking one? I 100% suggest you do. But as I said, I carry with 10 rounds in the gun a spare magazine with 10 rounds. And I look at the amount of ammo someone might fire in a standard civilian defensive encounter. That said, when I get this gun finally tested and that rear sight set up, will I be happier with my 15 to 16 rounds in the gun and a spare magazine of 18 rounds? Yes, probably so. So I would absolutely benefit that. Just keep in mind that the bigger and the heavier the gun, the more ammo, the more difficult it is to conceal, and the heavier it is going to be on your belt system. And I always tell people that if your carry handgun is not comfortable enough, light enough, and concealable enough where you're going to carry it 100% of the time, we've got a problem. So consider that as well. But more ammo is certainly better. I totally agree with that. Ted, thank you for that comment. I appreciate that. Dan, thank you as well. So that's all I have. All right, folks. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for sharing. You all stay safe. Rewind and watch us if you watch us later on. If you're watching us later on YouTube or Facebook or whatever else, please share the broadcast anyways. Tell people a little bit about Mike Seeklander. Go to MikeSeeklander.com to find the defensive handgun program, which is featured on iBooks and a bunch of different locations. You can get it digitally or the physical copy as well. Stay safe, folks. And until then, train hard.